The first reading this morning comes from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 12 through 24. Who has scooped up the ocean in his two hands, or measured the sky between his thumb and little finger? Who has put all the earth's dirt in one of his baskets, weighed each mountain and hill? Why, the nations are but a drop in a bucket, a mere smudge on a window. Watch him sweep up the islands like so much dust off the floor. All the nations add up to simply nothing before him. Less than nothing is more like it, a minus. Have you not been paying attention? Have you not been listening? God sits high above the round ball of earth. The people look like mere ants. He stretches out the skies like a canvas, yes, like a tent canvas to live under. He ignores what all the princes say and do. The rulers of the earth count for nothing. Princes and rulers don't amount to much. Like seeds barely rooted, just sprouted, they shrivel when God blows on them. Like flecks of chaff, they're gone with the wind. A reading from the letter of Chief Seattle. The president of Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land. But how can you buy or sell the sky, the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of the earth is sacred to my people. This we know. Earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. We do not weave the web of life, we are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. One thing we know, our God is also your God. One thing we know, which white people may one day discover, our God is the same God. You may think that you own God as you wish to own our land, but you cannot. God's compassion is equal for red people and white. One thing we know, there is only one God.
As is the custom for Native American peoples, I want to introduce myself to you today by naming my grand familial heritage. I am Cynthia Bagley, on my mother's side, granddaughter of New Brunswick Canadians, and granddaughter on my mother's father's side of the first English white people to reside in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I am granddaughter of my father's people, English from Yarmouth, Maine, and granddaughter of my father's mother's people, also early settlers in Dorchester, Mass, from England, the land of warm beer. In all seriousness, it's important to acknowledge that this church stands today on the sacred ground of the Sokoke people, later the Ishwalit tribe of the Western Abnaki Confederation. For centuries, these were the first peoples. This was the land they occupied but did not own. For who but God can own the land? Who can buy the sky? I'd like to talk today about something you may or may not have heard about: the doctrine of discovery, its history, its effect on our country and on our continent, and its effect on us as people of faith. Now, how many of you have heard the term, the doctrine of discovery? I'm sure Paul Vincent is well versed in this concept, as it is the foundation of some of the world's worst genocides. It certainly shaped and degraded the entire settlement of the so-called New World, leaving deep scars that poison our cultural health to this day. The doctrine of discovery was a series of papal bulls or proclamations, the first in 1452 and the second in 1493. It basically says that as white Christian people, if you, quote, discover another people that is not white or not Christian, they do not exist. They do not exist. That's the language. Now, as the zeal for European access to new material resources exploded during the 15th to 18th centuries, the message was clear. Non-Christian, non-white people, as I said, simply did not exist. If lands were discovered, they were there for the taking. Christian and white supremacy ruled. This doctrine became the foundation for the establishment of colonial law and property rights, still operational today. And if you don't understand the concept, I'd like you to set out your phones and keys and hand them to me, for I will have discovered them and I will take them because they are mine. While the bulls were originally issued by the Catholic Church, Protestant reformers, especially the New England Puritans, working furiously on their status as the elect of God, remember all that predestination stuff, embraced the doctrine as ultimately an obvious truth. Well, of course, we are candidates for the elect of God. These folks aren't even in the game. From the Caribbean to Latin America, to South America, to North America, to Canada, the primary goal was for the colonists to push ever westward, starving, relocating, murdering, plundering, and deculturizing children in notorious Indian schools. These practices were replicated in Australia, Africa, Asia, and the Hawaiian Islands. It is written that King George drew a line down the middle of the Appalachians in 1763, declaring the land off limits for wanton expansion, the land to the west of that line. So angered were the colonists, they penned a fierce letter of protest to the king, which they signed on July 4th, 1776. Now, those who follow these things, of course, know the rest of this history. The massacres, the battles, the lies, the deceits. Today, the Indian people still bear the cost of a legal system that cannot undo its decision that land can be owned and we have a right to own it and you have none. So today, as white Christian nationalist groups grow in number, as hate and violence dominate their discourse and actions, as this whole movement is emboldened, the doctrine of discovery lives on. At the risk of sounding radically woke, We all, my friends, pay a price. Those directly affected by the Indian genocide suffer the pain of post-traumatic stress. But scientists now know that this trauma is not affecting that person alone, but is passed down at the cellular level throughout the generations of its victim. Post-traumatic stress of a people is intergenerational. They carry it with them in their bodies. And the latest discovery is that perpetrators, wittingly or unwittingly, also suffer the physical and intergenerational effects of these crimes against humanity. We don't get off the hook. We suffer the guilt. We suffer the shame. As one Indigenous activist put it, 97% of Canadians are suffering the scourge of this history, and the other 3% are in denial. You know, for me, the most powerful part of Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's new series on the Holocaust was that Hitler studied and took inspiration from America's westward expansion and the genocide of the Native American people. Hitler was watching and taking notes. Now, thankfully, our United Church of Christ at the national level passed a resolution at its 29th synod or gathering, formally apologizing to the Native peoples of America and seeking forgiveness and reconciliation. Today, our denomination works tirelessly as allies with our Indigenous brothers and sisters to effect justice. So if humility is something you embrace, you have come to the right church to begin to make amends. Respect, courage, honesty, truth, wisdom, humility, and love, the 7 teachings of the grandfathers, echoed in the teachings of Jesus Christ, whose last thought was of domination. The Great Spirit soars overhead, wings encompassing all humankind, wings stretched to see all, embrace all, and love all. Let us feel the beating of those wings in our hearts. Amen.